Hello, it's me, Antonio D'Amico, and this is D&D with a twist. In this series, I take a D&D thing, like a class, a monster, a race, or whatever I feel like. I give you a rundown of what that thing is in vanilla D&D, and then we see how we can give that thing a fun, funky, fresh twist. Could be a new way to look at existing lore, a fun interpretation that shows a new side of D&D, or the perfect video to send to your DM so they finally let you make that character you've always dreamed of. So when I think of tieflings, I think of...
The dark shadows of the day soon crept into Mike's dreams as wild, grisly nightmares haunted his sleep.
I would see just horrific, awful, just bloody and horrible creatures hacking at my friends and...
Tieflings are the race for poetry enthusiasts and people with aesthetic Pinterest boards. A tiefling is essentially a human that, somewhere along their ancestral line, was touched by a devil. Basically, a long time ago, a guy in their family tree decided to make a deal with the devil, probably by playing D&D in the 80s. And now, generations down the line, some of their descendants look all funky and devil-like. This leads to many people mistreating tieflings, assuming they are evil and untrustworthy by nature, when they aren't. But let's put a pin in that, we'll come back to it. Visually, tieflings are very easily recognizable for their horns, which can look like pretty much any horn. Their skin, that can be human-colored or reddish, although players have decided to overlook that.
What if it was purple?
Their fun tail, and spooky eyes with no pupils or sclera. Okay, side note, not to get too deep into the vast expanse that is Forgotten Realms lore, but tieflings used to be much weirder. The reason for this is that tieflings could be connected to any fiend. Because of that, some had hooves instead of feet, some were slimy, some had like extra legs. If they had Rakshasa blood, they could be furry.
Hi! Give me a backpack. Have you ever been bullied, humiliated, and scared by someone bigger, stronger, or older than you?
This changed after Wizards released a balance patch by way of Asmodeus. That one. Asmodeus did this so all tieflings would look like him, and he could become a god. Don't ask. I've already talked way too much about this, and apparently this is not even a thing anymore because I found somewhere that tieflings from other demonic lineages exist again. And there's also the new Fiendish options. So what was the point of the balance patch? I thought that was to make the race more uniform and easy to give stats to and...
What? Child. Anyway, so...
Whatever. There's not much on tiefling culture, and I plan on making a little bit more of that later, so pay attention. Because many tieflings are born from human parents, not tiefling parents. It's said that they tend to be more independent on account of people being awful to them, and that many of them don't trust strangers easily. A super interesting tidbit, and I'm gonna use this later as well, are virtue names. Basically, it's common for tieflings to name themselves after a virtue they find particularly crucial and want to exemplify, after a thing that is the most important to them. For example, a tiefling that has sworn to avenge their parents' death might call themselves Vengeance. A tiefling that values kindness and compassion might choose Gentle as a name. But they can be more abstract. Maybe a tiefling that grew up poor and absolutely refuses to ever go back to living in squalor might name themselves Opulence.
You own everything!
A tiefling that commits to baking the best sweet treats in their city can name themselves after their favorite ingredient, like cinnamon or honey. Basically, tiefling virtue names embody what they find most important in life, and can change as they grow and evolve as people. On the mechanic side of things, tieflings get a number of bonuses. If you're using racial ability scores, tieflings get a +2 to their charisma, which makes them fantastic charisma casters, and a +1 to intelligence because we hate synergy. I don't know. Well, you also get resistance to fire, which is amazing and will save your ass a whole bunch of times. Dark vision, just like 90% of people in D&D. And some fun cantrips and spells, like Prestidigitation but worse. Know You. And...
Darkness?
You also get Infernal as a language, which is weird because most tieflings are not born into tiefling communities, so they just come with the language pre-installed in their brain. Anyway, as they stand without taking into account racial options, Tieflings make for amazing spellcasters and basically anything that benefits from charisma, which is literally anything in D&D. They are super versatile when it comes to the mechanic side of the game, but they are even more versatile if you look at Fiendish options.
Wouldst thou like to live deliciously?
If you use Fiendish options, you can further customize your little teeth.
Little thief.
Each Fiendish option corresponds to one of the Archdevils of Hell. Depending on what Archdevil is your Tiefling's daddy of choice, you get a Fiendish option. Let's take a quick look at them. Beelzebub, or Jabba the Hutt but make it devil, is all about corrupting people, so Tieflings of this line have vestigial powers that revolve around that, like Ray of Sickness and Crown of Madness. This pattern is about strategy and being careful, so Tieflings of this lineage are good at sneaking around, getting their little grubby hands on secrets, and make for good spies.
Don't be suspicious. Don't be suspicious.
Fiorna is all about manipulation and schemes. Tieflings of her lineage are blessed with terrifying girl boss powers, including spells like Suggestion and Charm Person. Glacia is the 400 IQ mastermind of hell, and her tieflings are really good at disguises, illusions, infiltrating places, and spycraft. This is hauntingly familiar.
Don't be suspicious. Don't be suspicious.
Levistus was the Archdevil equivalent of those Jack Sparrow cosplayers at conventions that refused to ever break character, ever. And then he got turned into a living ice cube, so Tieflings of his lineage have ice powers. I'm assuming to rub Levistus' current situation in his face. Mammon cares about one thing and one thing only.
What I really want to see is the money. I don't really need a D, I need the money.
Tieflings of his lineage get magical ways to make bank. Mephistopheles, or Mephisto if you're nasty, commits to a theme in body, mind, and spirit, and his theme is fire. Tieflings of his line get some fun fire-themed spells, like Burning Hands or Flame Blade. And finally, Zariel. No, not that one. Well, kind of like that one. Zariel is the Archdevil of Mad Gains and War. She's kind of the best Archdevil by a mile and a half, and according to her, she gave up being an angel to fight against demons. So not that different from Ariel, after all.
Part of that world.
Her whole thing is being mad all the time and fighting on an unending war and yada yada yada. Tieflings descending from her are good at hitting things. Moving on, there is one final option when it comes to Tieflings, the variant Tiefling option. This is a sort of hell-themed Build-A-Bear workshop approach to Tiefling making. You can choose between 3 options that your DM must approve of. The first of these is Devil's Tongue.
4 now half, 4 now quarter, half, 4.75, 4 now 5, 5 now quarter, 5 and a quarter, 5 and a half.
This one gives you Vicious Mockery and a bunch of charm spells. The second one is Hellfire.
Hellfire, dark fire.
This option makes you extra spicy by giving you a bunch of fire-themed magic. And finally, Winged.
I'm like a bird. I only fly away.
This one gives you little bat wings and the ability to fly if your DM allows you to take it. We have fun here. So as you might have noticed, Tieflings are one of the most popular options when it comes to D&D races, and I'm interested in talking about why that is. Outside of some basic innate cantrips and spells, and a nifty fire resistance, all that differentiates a Tiefling from a human are cosmetic changes. But in canon D&D lore, they are horribly mistreated by other races, assumed evil by default, and seen as not much different than an actual devil. But they are not predisposed to being evil, they are just humans with horns, so this attitude is unfair and unwarranted. I think that's why they are so compelling and people love them so much. We need to talk about the concept of the Wooby. So the first line of D&D Beyond's page on Tieflings is about how they are hated. Tieflings are on the receiving end of fantasy racism. Now, at the risk of getting too political, I will say that racism is bad. I think this is one of the reasons why Tieflings are so popular. A player may choose to play a Tiefling because they want to explore themes of racism and how it affects people and communities. Or maybe they want to talk about being born in a family that looks down on you for being something you had no say in. But I think a lot of players choose Tieflings because they have a specific conflict baked into the race. And conflict is compelling and essential for making characters that people resonate with and like. That conflict can be used to play with one of the most common and effective tropes in storytelling, the whoopee.
I understand that you little guys start out with your whoopies and you think they're great, and they are. They are terrific.
A whoopee is a character that we feel bad for because bad things happen to them without it being their fault. When you think of a character that is a whoopee, you want to hug them.
No, Mommy, please, no.
You want to take that character that has been suffering all their lives at the hands of a cruel, unjust world and protect them and make them feel better and... No, not like that, you sickos. Okay, maybe sometimes like that a little bit. This may sound basic, but many of the most popular characters in fiction could be considered whoopies. As long as that character was written so the audience feels sorry for their suffering, they could be considered a whoopee. Of course, whether these characters are effective at being a whoopee is a matter of opinion, but please, go to the comments and tell me how my examples are wrong.
It will only grow my algorithmical powers.
Tieflings make for fantastic whoopies because, as we have established, racism is indeed bad. And the fact that they are treated unfairly because of the way they look makes us instantly empathize with them. But not all DMs run worlds where Tieflings are mistreated, and not all players use that aspect of the race in their backstories, or feel comfortable bringing up those subjects at the table. Yet Tieflings remain super popular, so there must be something else. The second reason I think Tieflings are popular is even simpler than the potential for making a whoopee. They are customizable. Tieflings are described in canon as being able to have basically any shape of horns possible. They have tails and unnatural hair colors. They can be any non-human skin color you want, unless your DM hates fun. Your Tiefling could have a short stubby tail and short stubby horns or gazelle horns. They could have a tail that ends in a classic arrow or a tuft of hair. They could have human skin tones or red or green or purple. Their eyes could be a solid color or a human color or have an iridescent quality to them, or they could be purple. The possibilities are endless, and they are mostly purple. I think it's the mix of an easy to empathize with conflict, along with a super high degree of customization, that makes Tieflings very appealing to players. And that's all well and good, but what if we gave Tieflings a new twist? So you want to make a Tiefling? Tieflings are horny humans with technicolor skin that have the devil as a distant relative. Now when it comes to giving Tieflings a new twist, I'm not gonna make a new racial option, because Fiendish options cover pretty much everything. You have Fiendish options that give you a +1 on any single ability score, on top of the Tiefling's +2 charisma, and you have spell themes for every layer of hell and archdemon, including illusions, spycraft, corruption, charms, and fire. That's a pretty complete list of options. I think the best way to give Tieflings more of a twist is to play to their strengths and fill out their weaknesses. We've established that Tiefling strengths are 1. Their lore, the fact that they are seen as inherently evil by bigots, even though they are not, and 2. The potential for customization. They have an extremely customizable appearance that players can play around with. So what could we do with that? Maybe something that does not come from the lineage at all, but rather from the Tiefling's choosing. What if we fleshed out the social and cultural aspects of Tieflings, which are not super developed for them, while tying that to the high degree of customization in the race? Hear me out. Virtue names. A virtue name is something that a Tiefling chooses for themselves. It's a way for them to say, I am not inherently evil, in fact, I'm gonna become the embodiment of what I consider to be the most important value in life. What if a Tiefling's appearance was affected by what they considered most important? I think that'd be cool. So in this version of Tieflings, their horns and tails grow according to the Tiefling's morals. When they are born, Tieflings have short, stubby horns and tails, and as they develop a personality and moral compass, their horns and tails grow in different shapes to reflect that. Let's look at some examples. Strength. Tieflings that value strength, martial prowess, fighting, and in general being stronger or more dexterous develop thicker, more rugged horns. Some also grow hardened protrusions on their skin, similar to scales, kind of like armor. Their tails grow thick and end in sharp points, similar to arrows. Many of them use metallic caps on their horns and pierce them with studs to make them more resistant and battle-ready. Virtue names for these tieflings could be something like Trial, Vengeance, Tourney, Metal, or Fray. Nature. Tieflings that make it their life's mission to protect nature, uphold the natural order of the world, or dedicate their lives to taking care of animals and the land as farmers, develop horns closer to those of animals. They can grow long, branching antlers like those of a deer, or horns that curl on themselves, similar to those of a ram. Their tails end in a tuft of hair the same color as the hair that grows on their head. The tieflings that prefer the wilder side of nature will adorn their horns with moss and other living plants, and turn their horns in a sort of portable ecosystem. Their virtue names could be along the lines of wild, season, life, world, or primal. Study. Tieflings that dedicate their lives to studying science, history, arcana, and any other academic pursuit see their horns develop in interesting ways. They're often not symmetrical, one horn curling past the other or one growing longer than the other. They also often develop a second set of horns shorter than the other, some saying that this is a sign of taking an interest in two different fields of research. Their horns also tend to sport a twisting pattern in their grooves, similar to a unicorn. Their tails carry that asymmetry, often forking in two or more points, one slightly shorter than the others. Virtue names for these tieflings would be something like Arcana, Reason, Reflection, Cognition, or Muse. Religion. If a tiefling chooses to devote their life to a religious purpose, honoring their chosen god, investing their body and soul to worship a divine creature, or otherwise dedicating their lives for the good of others, their horns reflect this choice. They grow in a wide arch, forming an almost perfect circle above their heads. As the tiefling grows, the horns do as well, until they join at the center, creating a halo around their heads. In religious circles, tieflings with a perfect circle are seen as particularly pious. Some of them choose to engrave religious text on their horns when they grow into a perfect halo to celebrate the occasion. Their tails also grow in a very similar way, and many tieflings adorn them with rings once the circle is closed, giving it the look of a religious staff. Virtue names for tieflings that focus on religion would be Piety, Repentance, Forgiveness, Prayer, and Miracle.
There can be miracles.
Social. There are tieflings that dedicate themselves to honing their social graces, living their lives among other people, like those that become merchants, courtiers, thespians, jesters, socialites, or ambassadors. These tieflings tend to grow thin, more delicate horns. Their horns tend to be completely smooth and point upwards, never resembling those of animals. They might be wavy, but never curl on themselves, giving their silhouette a more elongated, regal look. Their tails could end at a graceful point or grow in the shape of a fan. Many of these tieflings adorn their horns and tails with small chains, beaded laces, precious stones, and rings. If they use caps on their horns, it's not to make them sturdier, but for fashion. Their virtue names would be along the lines of Poise, Cheer, Eloquence, Fanfare, Bargain, or Mesmer. Combinations. Tieflings, like any other person, are complex, and many tieflings find their calling in something that falls between two of these categories. Their horns and tails grow to reflect that. A tiefling that dedicates their life to the study of religion, like a theologian, might grow two sets of horns in the form of a halo, or maybe the horns will have an asymmetrical growth pattern. A tiefling that uses their physical strength to protect nature might grow big, thick antlers like those of a moose, rather than the thin antlers of a deer. A courtmage that has studied arcana, but also the intricacies of living in high society, might grow two sets of thin, elongated horns. Their tails would of course reflect the mix of interests and values as well. And that's it. By making it so a tiefling's appearance reflects their values, it beefs up a less explored aspect of the race, its culture. Maybe in your setting, tieflings that have a low sense of purpose see their horns shrink or become stumps. Maybe there's a specific tiefling village where the size of the horns dictates who leads the village. Maybe tieflings in academic circles have an unfair bias towards particularly twisted horns, or those that have many pairs of horns. It allows for the same customization that the Tiefling race gave to players, but adds an additional layer of complexity and meaning to it. But implementing all that into your game sounds like a lot of work. I mean, you would have to come up with NPCs, and they need to have their own motivations and plot hooks for adventures, and... Wait, what's that over there? Okay, say it with me. Move that bus! Yes, it's 4 Tiefling NPCs that you can plop right into your campaign. They are illustrated by me, and they have their own personalities, motivations, ideas for settings, and plot hooks for adventures. You can get them in the description below for, say it with me again, free. Go put a whole bunch of Tieflings in your adventures. Or play another one. What's the harm in making a new one? You already have 34. And welcome to the end of the video. You made it! I'm proud of you. So, Tieflings are one of my favorite races in D&D, so this sure was long. When I started working on this script, I really wanted to make a new racial option for them, but Fiendish options are so, they cover so much ground that that's how the idea of them changing depending on their virtue came about. And I'm pretty happy with it. I think it's fun. For the next race videos that I do plan on making more racial options because I think that would be really, really fun, especially for those that don't have many or any. You know who I'm talking about. But yeah, I hope you're really liking this D&D with a twist thing. It is a ton of work, it's insane, but people's reception has been insane, and people have been so kind, and it's been great. However, this is only the 3rd video that I've done so far. I'm very new, so if you can share this, that is the thing that actually helps the most, I think. Comments and likes also help tremendously. Like subscribing to the thing also helps. So if you want to do that, go ahead. Comment what your favorite Tiefling color is. Or whatever. Yeah, that's how YouTube works. Everything is in the description below. And yeah, I think that's the end. I'm going to stare at the 34 Tieflings I've made and fantasize about one day playing them. Okay, thank you so much for watching. See you. Love you. Mwah.